Thanks for joining us on our series, Old Made New, as we demolish our old garage and build a new home studio in its place. As a homeschool family, we're working together with the help of a few friends to self-build a home studio. I'm not only building a film production business, in many respects, I'm rebuilding myself as I navigate depression and trauma from recent years. To keep track of future episodes, please subscribe to my channel as we complete each step and achieve our dream. In today's episode, we're fitting doors and cladding to make our studios secure. If you've ever scraped old paint off fragile timber, you either will never do it again, or you've learned the patience and care that produces the most beautiful finishes. Our antique door has been waiting in our neighbour's shed for 6 months, and now it's time to fill some holes and make a few adjustments, ready for a new finish, taking care not to lose any of the antique attributes that show how old it really is. This door will be fitted into a modern aluminium frame to suit the rest of the studio's joinery, and to comply with the New Zealand Building Code, a modern double-glazed low-E panel will be fitted. That means a deeper rebate to allow for a much thicker panel. The external side will be painted with a warm yellow and high gloss. On the inside, a clear polyurethane will be used to bring out the natural timber grain, although some fragments will be left to show its age, an old door in a new build. With a finished door ready to be fitted into the door jamb and all the wiring run for the electronic locks, it was time to cut the final door through the building wrap and get ready for our biggest delivery so far. Insulation, linear boards and ply for the workshop's internal walls. With such a big order suddenly delivered and sitting inside the flimsy wrap, I was suddenly aware of the desire to make the building secure. Although our roller door was ordered ready for installation, the internal lining needed to be fitted, but not before the insulation was fitted, and that was dependent on the wiring being completed, and that had to wait until the linear boards were on. But even before that, all the windows needed to be in place with all the sill bars and fiddly flashings, and so began the race to get the first thing done. Sometimes the order of installation was not straightforward, and so I found myself having to cut the aluminium W flashing by hand with the smallest hacksaw I could find, the one on my Swiss Army knife. It was a painfully slow process as it was already partly fixed in place, but I managed to persevere. I nailed in the head flashing and heated and sealed the flexible flashing tape, installed the cavity closure strip, then finally the cavity battens for fixing the cladding. I also needed to make 2 150mm ventilation ports fixed in place on a 5-degree incline. There'll be more on that next time. As the final flashings were levelled and fixed in place, I was reminded that our building wrap had a maximum of 90 days to install our cladding to prevent any UV damage to the wrap. We were about 3 weeks out from that, so we had to get moving. Once again, it was all hands on deck. Getting the first board level and in the right place meant all the rest can be measured from the bottom. But you have to start well, or else from certain angles, the build might look out of level and uneven. The back end was always going to be a challenge, with the boards needing to be fixed below the neighbour's deck, which meant swinging a hammer in a confined space. But soon enough, we'd worked out a plan, and layer by layer, the outer shell of the studio crept up the wall. At 4.2 metres long, many linear boards required joining end on end. This was made possible with a tongue and groove moulding on both ends. Although it was easy to cut off the wrong end, I managed to reduce waste and even returned 3 of the 176 lengths I estimated I'd need. Each board weighed a hefty 16.3 kgs, which would ordinarily be a manageable weight to lift on your own. But at this length, holding a board in place with one hand while hitting a nail proved impossible without extra help. Together we nailed over 1,000 nails into 726 metres of linear boards, weighing in at a whopping 2.8 tonne. I realised quite quickly that some carefully cut blocks could be clamped to hold the next board in the right place for nailing, especially when smaller hands were available to help. By the time we had nailed up to the windows, it became obvious there would be a number of shorter lengths required, especially around windows and doors. Being made from fibre cement, linear boards require a pre-drilled hole before nailing to reduce any damage. Thankfully, walls that didn't require any joins were much easier to install, as lengths were simply cut to size and the ends undercoated. This ensures the longest possible life for the cladding. With a deadline approaching and a number of days lost to bad weather, I decided to spend a few days cutting and undercoating enough boards to get underway as soon as the weather shifted. Once the rain had subsided and the sun came out, we were ready to work, and we learned that longer lengths often go up faster than shorter lengths. Even though we needed to do a little dance to get around our makeshift drain pipe and leap over our freshly dug trench, having a dance partner made the work easier. The shorter lengths and those that needed to be carefully fitted around windows take significantly longer to cut, paint and nail in place. In some instances, the window needed to be pulled out to get the board in the right place. With rain on the way and Catherine's help, we nailed up as many of the longer boards we possibly could until we could not reach any higher. It was time for scaffolding to be set up to finish the first wall. With the cladding now halfway up the wall, the once translucent wrap revealed an ever-growing shadow. When we woke the next day with hardly a cloud in the sky, we didn't need any persuading. It was time to work as long as we could to ensure we could get the wrap covered. We no longer had weeks to finish, we were down to days. And if there is one thing I have learned, the weather gives no care to the things a man cares much about. I continued to fix cladding around all the windows as the weather made empty threats of a downpour. The shorter lengths were starting to go up much faster, having learned to trust the level and my line of sight. It was satisfying to see the reflection of each board from the opposite side line up with the newly nailed boards. Catherine and I worked hard fixing the high boards on the longest wall, and up until this point, I had no real injuries other than blisters. You'll be pleased to know that my camera did not capture me hitting my thumb with the shaft of my east wing hammer. But I know that this nail is not going to survive, and that means slowing down and recovery when I can't afford to stop. Thankfully, I was able to continue fixing a few more boards on the end gable before I was in too much discomfort. The silicone went on and sealed all the gaps, ready for undercoating. With an ever-depleting pile of boards of all different sizes, I managed to cut all the smaller lengths with minimal wastage. With their ends primed and the sun still keen to see a good day's work out of me, I managed to fix all the short lengths up to the top of the roller door, ready for the longer lengths above. Jay was a great help lifting the longer lengths up onto the scaffolding and holding in place, while I pre-drilled all the nail holes. With another level of scaffolding, I could get right to the top of the front gable, and I realised we were going to get the cladding up in time. With both ends now completely clad and sealed with silicone, the end was in sight. A couple of days out from our 90-day deadline, we were on the final stretch and the weather seemed to be on our side too. The last few lengths were fitted, all the nail holes were filled and sanded, and it was time to start making the box corners and window fascias along with all the scribers to fit around each linear board. Box corners were common in early 20th century homes for both aesthetics and weather protection. When we bought our 1930s bungalow, it was in need of repair and lacked many box corners, so I've had some experience cutting and fitting these. Scribers require precise measurements to make a snug fit around each board. A coat of primer is applied, then dried before installation. With all the boards on and almost all of the fascias and scribers in place, we decided to start undercoating, starting on the shaded side in the mornings while finishing the fascias and scribers on the sunny side while the paint was drying in the afternoon. Painting the back wall was the toughest job due to the close proximity of the neighbour's deck, but we finished on time and even managed to do some plumbing before finishing the last few coats of paint. This week's episode focused on securing the studio, but there had also been a lot of internal work required before the roller door was installed. For a long time, only a thin layer of polythene covered that doorway, leaving us vulnerable. If we have faith in something, we will put our weight on it, trusting it will bear our weight. We trusted the weather to hold, paint to protect the cladding, my business's resilience during a recession, and God for healing and reconciliation. In all these things, faith often felt like putting all our weight on something that seemed as thin as a layer of polythene. But in our storms, we found a strong layer of hope.